Hey guys, it's Josh here, and in today's video I'm going to talk about how to process your emotions so you don't keep doing dumb shit. And this is something that's been present in my awareness today especially. I try to make these videos with things, ideas, concepts that are present for me in my consciousness. So I'm not trying to force them too much. I'm not trying to have too much control over the YouTube strategy or what videos I'm going to make. I tend to make these videos purely based off what is present for me at the time. And there's a lesson in this that you might not understand, but one that's very important for processing emotions. Because what people tend to do with their emotional experience is they tend to control it or try to fight against it or resist it. People tend to avoid talking about certain things, and then, they only want to talk about other things. For example, some people might tend to avoid talking about the things that they have shame around or the things that they have guilt around because they don't want to bring other people down or be a negative person. And so they try to avoid those things that are negative, and they only try to talk about the things that are positive. You see this so often in men, especially men who suppress their emotions and who suppress their experience. They do it generally because they don't want to bring anyone down, oh, we don't need to talk about that, or we don't need to go into that, or don't worry about it. And they try to suppress their experience. They try to really cut off a part of the experience that they're having, and they do it through some warped sense of nobility. It's like, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to bring other people down. But what it actually is doing is it's being dishonest. And it's kind of like withholding certain aspects of the truth of what they are experiencing in the present. This is called emotional suppression, right? And if it goes unchecked, it can lead to all sorts of addictions. It can lead to relationship breakdowns. It can lead to health issues. It can lead to suicide. It can be a real downward spiral. And it all starts with suppressing the experience that they're having, and they're trying to control the experience that they're having. They're trying to control it by avoiding certain parts of it. And so I see this so often with the people that I work with, right? People come to work with me often because they have anxiety. So let's talk about anxiety. Again, people want to avoid the experience of anxiety. They're often trying to avoid symptoms. They're trying to resist it. They're trying to control it. They're saying, I don't want that experience, and I only want this experience of being, calm or happy or whatever it is. But that is not how you will overcome your anxiety. You need to stop forcing, controlling, and resisting, and start accepting, allowing, and flowing with life. Just like I make these videos in a flow of consciousness, right? People need to learn to live with this flow of consciousness, because that is how you will stop suppressing your emotions. And when you stop suppressing your emotions, you start to feel lighter, you start to feel clearer, you start to feel free. And again, it comes back to actually a conversation around honesty, because people will often tell me that they want to be communicating clearly and openly. They want to be strong speakers, confident speakers, and yet they can't even be open about their full experience. Being a strong speaker, being someone who's confident, being someone who can process your emotions means that you need to be someone who has the space to allow and accept the full spectrum of the emotional experience. Now, let me just give another example, which is about addictions, because people who have addictions, let's just say they're smoking weed or they're drinking alcohol or something like that. Those substances are making them feel peaceful, happy, joy. So they're associating these substances with those feelings, and they like those feelings. They want to have those feelings. Those are nice feelings to have. And so what they're doing is they're doing these substances to get to that feeling. and at the same time to get away from the negative feelings that they don't want, like the boredom or the shame or the feeling of being anxious or depressed. They're trying to avoid those feelings. They're trying to only have the positive feelings. That's not how being a human works. As a human, you have a full range of emotions. And if you want to feel more peace and happiness and joy and love, you actually need to learn how to feel, the other end of the spectrum as well. Because if you're constantly trying to avoid that, negative aspect of your life because you don't want to be a downer or whatever, what you're actually going to do is you're actually going to bring more of that, because what you resist persists. And in a roundabout way, I was just talking to a client about this today. He was telling me, I don't want to talk about these things because, I don't want to bring you down, or I don't want to bring anyone down. But then what happens when when you suppress a certain part of your experience, you keep it kind of stuck in you. Emotion is energy in motion. So your emotions are energy. So when you are trying to suppress a certain emotion, you're trying to suppress this energy, it actually starts to be built up in your system. So you suppress these emotions, or in this case, my client was suppressing emotions because he didn't want to make me feel bad or whatever, or he didn't want to make anyone else feel bad. And so he suppressed his experience, didn't want to talk about it. But then that suppression ends up leading him to, drugs, alcohol, stress, again, ends up building up anger inside, resentment inside, frustration inside, and then he ends up blowing up. He has an anger problem, right? He's blowing up. So he wants to avoid making others feel bad, but he ends up being this addict that is essentially having aggressive blow-ups. So you can see he's trying to avoid that experience because he's trying to be nice, but in the end, he actually ends up with more of that experience and in a more extreme case. Now, this is applicable for pretty much everyone. What you try to resist or avoid will only come back with more force. So that's why it's not about trying to avoid those experiences, but it's about learning to take responsibility for your experience. He also said, he doesn't want to be someone who's like constantly complaining or constantly bringing things down. And when it comes to complaining, what you'll notice is that you will complain because you will blame someone else. When you stop blaming others and you start taking responsibility for your experience, that is when you will stop complaining, and that is when you will stop being such a Debbie Downer, because you are taking responsibility for your experience. And this applies to your emotions as well. Instead of avoiding them, you take responsibility for them. You take ownership of them. You take ownership of your experience. And when you do that, that is when you will be able to process your emotions easily. That is when you will be able to speak confidently and clearly, because you're not in your head trying to figure out how to say the right thing, but you're just saying whatever the thing is that is present and on your mind. I've made like 200 videos now, and I never use a script. 200 videos on YouTube, more like 1,500 on Instagram. And I never use a script for my videos, right? I just speak, and I just allow the words to come out. And people need to learn how to do this with their emotions, right? You don't necessarily need to allow your emotions to come out, but you need to allow them to be present, and you need to allow yourself to come into a state of acceptance with them so that you can process them internally without reacting to them, okay? Because when you start reacting, that's when there's a problem. You don't need to react. You can actually solve this issue by allowing and accepting your emotions in the first place, not trying to avoid them, and by realizing there's nothing wrong with them. It's actually perfectly okay and normal for you to feel the whole spectrum of emotions. And when you actually give yourself permission to do that, you will find that you'll actually start having less of those negative emotions, and you'll have more positive emotions, because you'll actually be in a state of acceptance. And being in a state of acceptance and neutrality is actually a much higher state of consciousness than, avoidance or anxiety, constantly worrying about what you're experiencing. Instead, when you come up to a place of neutrality and acceptance, it's a much higher level of consciousness. You'll find that you're actually feeling a lot more peaceful, a lot more happy, and a lot more present. So how do you actually take all of this and apply it to your own life? Well, something like a simple morning meditation practice where you practice sitting with yourself. You practice sitting with your thoughts, you practice sitting with your emotions, you just observe all of it happening without being too attached to it. You focus on your breathing, you focus on being present and centered in your body, and if you can do that over time, you're going to start really rewiring your neural pathways, you'll start regulating your nervous system, and over time you'll notice you have a full reset mind, body, and spirit. If you want to see how I've helped hundreds of people do this, there's a link below to check out my website, and you can learn the mind launch method. It's a 3-step process: reprogram the mind, regulate the nervous system, and reset your life. Go check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.